Hi again. Here's another bedroom production of Orphan Cars. Back in the early 1900s, there were a lot of startup companies making automobiles. After all, the internal combustion engine car was in its infancy, and a lot of entrepreneurs were eager to hop on the bandwagon. Some lasted several years. Others faded away or merged with other automakers. Let's look at a few companies and their cars. Back in 1867, a Quebec watchmaker named Henry Seth Taylor unveiled a creation that he'd been working on for 2 years. It was a steam-powered buggy. It broke down on its first outing, and Taylor could never interest anyone in buying it. But that vehicle could be considered the first step in Canada's automotive history. Nelson and Milton Good created the Leroy Manufacturing Company in 1899, introducing the first gas-powered automobile manufactured in quantities for sale in Canada. The Leroy was a Canadian automobile manufactured in Berlin, now Kitchener, between 1899 and 1904. Brothers Milton and Nelson Good bought an Oldsmobile and used it as a pattern for their first car. And in 1901, the brothers converted an American mobile steamer to a gas engine. And by 1902, they were ready to start production. Leroy runabouts were small open cars carrying 2 passengers. Many had a jump seat in the rear for additional seating. The car sold well. Nearly half cars purchased were runabouts. However, like many car companies, Leroy was not able to keep pace with the competition, and they closed in 1904. Now the story of James Tudhope. He was a carriage maker, but fire in the plant caused him to look for alternatives, and so, in 1909, he formed the Tudhope Motor Company. Car sales were good right up to 1914, when production was converted for military use during World War I. The car production was not resumed, though, after the war. The Amherst was a Canadian automobile made in Amherstburg in 1911. The unusual feature of the car was the rear seats could be converted to turn the car into a light truck. The first car was financed by backers in Detroit, who withdrew their support before production could begin. Only 3 cars were built, and the company failed. The Chalmers Motor Company was an American company located in Detroit. It started in 1908 and turned out high-end vehicles. Here is their story. Back in 1907, Roy Chapin was with the Thomas Detroit Car Company. Chapin would go on to co-found Hudson Motor Corporation. The Thomas Detroit Company made cars from 1906 to 1908. In order to survive, they needed bright young minds like Hugh Chalmers. At the time, Chalmers was working for the National Cash Register Company, but in 1908 agreed to join Thomas Detroit. The company name was changed to Chalmers Detroit. The next step was to set up dealerships across the U.S. Starting in 1907, a new factory was under construction in Detroit. The first car was a 1908 Chalmers 30. Like other companies, Chalmers entered their cars in races, and they won a lot of trophies within the first 2 years. It was a great marketing tool. Chalmers' best year was in 1911, when it became the number 8 auto producer in the U.S., selling 6,250 cars. The early car industry was web-filled with startups, mergers, bankruptcies, and connections between entrepreneurs. It was a hopscotch of risk-takers. Here's another story. In 1901, the automobile industry was in its infancy, when Benjamin Briscoe helped finance David Buick's first car. That's right, Buick as in Buick Automobiles. In return for the finance, Briscoe gained a 97% interest in the Buick Motor Company. He sold Buick in 1904 to James H. Whiting, owner of the Flint, Michigan Wagon Works, and used the money to help found Maxwell Briscoe Motor Company, makers of the Maxwell. You may recall Jack Benny's reference to his beloved Maxwell. This was Briscoe's greatest success in the industry. By 1909, they were the 3rd largest American make of cars with 9,400 sales. In mid-1910, Briscoe and Associates produced 15,000 Maxwells. But in the bank financial crisis of 1907, Briscoe had many bad experiences with bankers and was forced to do his own financing. He also had to do some fast thinking. The United States Motor Company, USMC, was organized by Briscoe in 1910 as a selling company to represent various manufacturers. What followed was a long and complicated story that I won't go into here. Through USMC, by mid-1910, Briscoe and Associates had produced 15,000 Maxwells, 10,000 Brush Runabouts, and 10,000 starter Daytons, along with Columbia automobiles and Alden Saxon trucks. When USMC fell apart, its assets were purchased by Walter Flanders, a co-founder of EMF back in 1908, which was acquired by Studebaker in 1910. Flanders reorganized the company as the Maxwell Motor Company. Briscoe was out of the picture. Briscoe went on to build a car called the Ajax, built on French designs. Briscoe dropped out of the car business when the U.S. entered World War I, but his brothers carried on with the company until 1923. Maxwell was the only surviving member of the USMC group. However, as the 20s came along, Maxwell and Chalmers were negotiating for a merger. In 1921, Walter P. Chrysler stepped in to buy a controlling interest in both Maxwell and Chalmers as they were in financial difficulty. The company was reorganized again in 1925 and became Chrysler Corporation. Chrysler started building cars in Windsor in 1925. A year after the first Chrysler badged car was introduced in Michigan the year before. Chrysler used its acquired Windsor Maxwell plant at Tecumseh Road in McDougall. In 1913, Hugh Chalmers, remember him? He left the company to start Saxon Motors. That company was in business from 1914 to 1922. In 1917, 28,000 cars were made, making it seventh in terms of U.S. car sales. The company moved into the Apex plant in 1921. Apex of Insolenti made a car called the Ace. Most Ace cars were Tourings and a few Roadsters. Production ended in 1922 with a total of 256 cars built. Things were moving quickly in the car business. Tate Accumulator Company of Canada was a Toronto company that produced batteries for use in electric cars and motorboats. In 1912, Tate Accumulator started a new company, Tate Electric Limited, based in Walkerville. The following year, Tate Electric had an impressive array of electric vehicles for purchase, including a roadster capable of 30 miles an hour, as well as several trucks. What doomed all electric cars was the introduction of the electric starter. Tate ended production in 1914 or early 1915. The Chalmers Motor Company bought the plant in 1916. I know it's a complicated tale. It's a hopscotch of early car making. Let's move on. Another early car maker was Elcar of Elkhart, Indiana. The first car was produced in 1905 by Elkhart Carriage Company. Elkhart closed shop in 1931 after the Great Depression hit. Moisey L. Menard was a blacksmith and wagon maker and a native of Bell River. He knew the automobile was the coming thing, and so he had a car design that he could manufacture at his wagon works. The result was the Monarch Autobuggy. It was a high-wheeler passenger car with a two-cylinder air-cooled engine that he built for 2 years. High-wheelers were automobiles with oversized tires, which were in demand at the time. Early Monarch vehicles were crudely made, but durable. They were manufactured in Windsor totally, rather than using imported parts. The Menard enjoyed good sales as far away as the prairies in Quebec. In 1910, the company changed its name to Monarch Autobuggy Company. But with growing competition and fading popularity of the high-wheeler, Menard switched to the manufacture of trucks. He produced a series of trucks from 1 ton to 3.5 tons. In 1916, Menard built an aerial ladder fire truck for the Walkerville Fire Department. Menard sold out to Maple Leaf Manufacturing Company of Montreal in 1920 and became mayor of Riverside in 1923. The Regal Motor Company of Detroit made cars from 1907 to 1918. This was an economy car company. The company opened a production plant in Walkerville in 1910. It made the Regal 30, a four-cylinder touring car built identical to the U.S. model. Late that summer, the Regal 30 was driven 5,000 miles visiting country fairs between Halifax and Winnipeg in order to stir up business. The Regal was met with little success, and the company folded soon afterwards. A second Regal appeared in Kitchener in 1915. That company fared a bit better than the first. Brock Motors, formerly Standstill Motors, was founded in 1921 in Amherstburg. The factory had previously been home to the Amherst car. The company announced that it planned to build 10,000 vehicles per year. That was quite optimistic. Financial backing for the project was based on stockholders. Before production started, Standstill Motors was renamed as Brock Motors Limited, and only one car was ever produced, the Brock 6, a large 5-passenger touring car powered by a 55-horsepower Continental engine. The company closed in 1921. As you know, Dodge is still making automobiles today, but here's a local story that predates Chrysler. The Dodge brothers, John and Horace, went to work as machinists in the Dominion Typograph Company in Windsor. In 1897, the Dodge brothers, with an investor's help, manufactured bicycles. Within a few years, they sold the bicycle business and in 1900 used the proceeds of the sale to set up their own machine shop in Detroit. In their first year of business, the Dodge Brothers Company began making parts for the automobile industry, including transmissions for Oldsmobiles and parts for Fords. By 1910, the Dodge Brothers were so successful they built a new plant in Hamtramck, Michigan. In 1914, they began building motor trucks for the U.S. military during the arms buildup for World War I. And in October 1917, they produced their first commercial car. From there, everything mushroomed. Well, that's a quick look at the evolution of Dodge. And that's it for this session of Orphan Cars. I hope you enjoyed an early look at some of the cars that started the North American automobile industry. I thank you for viewing. Until we meet again.